The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
Liberty. Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Trumponomics, the surpassing triumph of the 45th President of the United States. Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com, and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. And today we'll examine the centerpiece of Donald Trump's campaign platform, Trumponomics, the economy and jobs in the Trump era, and how they compare to the audacious promises made by then-candidate Trump as he prepares to launch his re-election campaign, while Democrats decide which of their 22 candidates will win the battle to face Trump next November. Plus, we'll examine the explosive state of Venezuela and how it might affect the U.S., and growing political turmoil in England, as we're joined by LibertyNation.com international correspondent and managing editor Mark Angelides. And we'll break down one of the most aggressive gun control manifestos ever advanced by a presidential candidate. It's Cory Booker with LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, and damnable things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. So why are the Democrats conflicted about impeaching Donald Trump? They threw the kitchen sink at him with a Mueller investigation. That didn't work. They've thrown every scurrilous accusation at him. They've publicly called him out as everything from a dictator to a racist, and yet he remains standing, and perhaps stronger than ever, with the little issue of whether he's a Russian spy now off the table for all but bottom-feeding leftists. But here's why so many Democrats want impeachment. Here's why. It was stated by a congressman who's been perhaps the leading proponent of impeachment, Representative Al Green of Texas. Listen.
I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected. If we don't impeach him, he will say he has been vindicated. He will say the Democrats had an overwhelming majority in the House and they didn't take up impeachment. He will say that we had a constitutional duty to do it if it was there and we didn't. He will say that he has been vindicated. But here's what I say. We're confronting a constitutional crisis as I speak to you.
So there it is. They want to impeach Trump because they think if they don't, he'll get reelected. We can at least appreciate Congressman Green's honesty in admitting again that he wants Trump impeached because otherwise he will win a second term in the White House. But the real storm brewing on Capitol Hill these days is over the escalating investigations by the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz and Attorney General William Barr into the actions of the Obama Justice Department and investigative agencies in spying on the Trump campaign in 2016. So what did the Obama White House know, and when did they know about Obama's top brass conducting surveillance on the Trump campaign? Nicholas Balassi of PJ Media caught up with Ben Rhodes, a top White House official, Deputy National Security Advisor under Obama, who denied any involvement.
We didn't know that there was an FBI investigation of Trump. I didn't. President Obama didn't. We don't We actually abided by the firewalls between. If there were any investigations that took place, those decisions were made in the Justice Department, in the FBI, not in the White House. They will find nothing that suggests that there was any political White House involvement in any of that. Literally, I learned about the FBI investigation into Trump as a private citizen in the frickin' Washington Post.
Well, we'll see if the Justice Department agrees that Obama knew nothing and said nothing about top officials in his administration setting up the Trump campaign and then getting a FISA warrant to conduct surveillance based on a disinformation dossier actually produced by the Hillary Clinton campaign. We'll find out the truth soon enough now. Meanwhile, the conga line of candidates seeking to unseat President Trump is out the door, 22 in all, and all of them except Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are struggling for any kind of attention. Biden has been labeled a so-called moderate compared to the numerous socialists running in the primary. But when he unveiled his campaign, Biden did say a few revealing things about his own progressive policies.
It's well past time that the minimum wage nationally be a minimum of $15. It's well past. Health care is a right, not a privilege. We have to give everybody the peace of mind they deserve. When Reagan was president, there were $800 billion in tax expenditures, meaning tax loopholes. You know what it is today? It's over $1,600 billion. We could send everyone in America to a community college for free. 6 million folks. 6 million folks knew.
So, $15 per hour minimum wage, health care as a right, free college for everyone, and by the way, also a promise to repeal the tax cut, which has led to economic growth and record low unemployment. So lest you think Biden is really kind of moderate, remember those positions. Donald Trump certainly will. But part of the reason Biden's at the head of the Democrats' line of candidates right now certainly has something to do with how bad the other candidates are. Listen to Amy Klobuchar try to explain away the booming economy when questioned by Jake Tapper of CNN, of all people.
The economy added more than 250,000 jobs, better than economists expected. Unemployment is at its lowest level in almost 50 years. Wages grew faster than prices did. Do you give President Trump the credit?
I give our workers and our businesses the credit, Jake. When you're out there across the country, you see people working harder and harder every day. And this has meant that our businesses are strong and we're selling American goods. That being said, a lot of people aren't sharing in this prosperity.
You know, if Trump walked on water, Amy Klobuchar would likely say it's because the water was so polluted because of climate change that it hardened up, something like that. But there's a candidate in the Democratic field who has actually set herself apart from the pack, Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who has centered her campaign on something none of the other candidates are talking about, ending our foreign entanglements. Here's an ad she just put out.
The neocons, neolibs, and mainstream media are all singing from the same song sheet, saying, we want war. We need more war. Now, Trump never gets media support unless he's threatening war or carrying out a military action.
You see these beautiful pictures at night. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons.
It's no wonder that North Korea won't give up their nuclear weapons. Now, as Commander-in-Chief, I will end these counterproductive, wasteful regime change wars.
Agree with her or not, but at least Tulsi Gabbard is saying something different and not in lockstep with all the other politically correct candidates spouting socialism. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard said she'll take the money she saves on foreign wars and invest it in climate change and the like. Well, such is life in the Democratic Party circa 2019. We close with two remarkable statements by another candidate, a hot ticket for a while on the Democratic side, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, the openly gay candidate who's married to another man, and yet is somehow considered something of a moderate in this field. But listen to him characterize Trump's signature slogan and renounce the country.
We could find greatness by just stopping the clock and turning it back and making America great again. When that past that he is promising to return us to was never as great as advertised.
So America was never that great. Good luck running on that. But wait, that's not all. Mayor Pete also went on MSNBC this week and said he'll gladly joust with Trump, but listen to the issue he focused on.
If somebody wants to raise a question of which one of us has a more traditional attitude on marriage, we can have that fight.
So again, here's a man married to another man who obviously implies in that soundbite that he's got a more traditional view of marriage than the thrice-married Donald Trump. Folks, as they say, you can't make this stuff up. Nobody would believe it. Quick break, and then we're back to talk Venezuela and England, one becoming a totalitarian wasteland, the other at a political crisis point.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel because
truth is
making a comeback.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, Venezuela descends into flames in an open revolution amidst an as yet unfulfilled promise by the widely recognized acting president Juan Guaido to take what 58 nations in the Venezuela legislature say is rightfully his, the title of acting president. But attempts to drive out the totalitarian dictator Nicolas Maduro failed just recently, so what to do next? Joining us to discuss and analyze is LibertyNation.com international correspondent, managing editor, and host of the new LibertyNation.com podcast, The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, Mark Angelides, who will also discuss the dangerously fraying political situation in England and Europe. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
I appreciate it. Now, the word coup is a misnomer because what Guaido attempted was to take what the Venezuela legislature handed him, the title of acting president, as recognized by no less than 58 nations, including the U.S. But does the recent failed so-called coup mean the time has passed for Juan Guaido to successfully take the presidency, or is hope still alive for that?
It's a pretty fluid situation, Tim, but realistically, the time is still going. This is by no means a done deal, a finished so-called coup, as you say. The legislature has granted him the powers of acting president. And the only thing that's keeping Maduro in place at the moment is he has what's called the legitimacy of being the president at present. It's still a very active situation.
3 million people have fled Venezuela. 3 million. I'm wondering, Mark, if people are aware of what 3 million people untethered from their country not that far from the United States will ultimately mean for the already out-of-control border situation on Mexico's southern border and then, of course, America's southern border.
Yeah, it's a situation that people haven't really thought about the massive ramifications of. I mean, American involvement, we can talk about how a country shouldn't be interfering in other countries, but this is going to affect America, whether that's a million new, well, let's be fair, refugees is what they'll be, homeless refugees turning up on your border there. It is an American issue. I mean, at the moment, you say 3 million. Latest estimates suggest that could be closer to 5 million. And while many of them have gone I guess, south to Brazil or west to Colombia at the moment. If the situation doesn't change, they're going to keep moving.
Well, Mark, it's been said that the urgent is often the enemy of the important. So, I mean, forgetting even the violence and corruption of the regime of totalitarian Marxist Nicolas Maduro, how is it even possible for a country sitting on literally an ocean of oil to descend into total economic collapse and hyperinflation with the currencies now essentially worthless?
Well, I mean, that's the $64,000 question, which, of course, in Venezuela is about $64 billion now.
Yes.
Realistically, what you have to look at is how these countries are run. These are not good people who run these countries. They spout the right words of equality and fraternity and liberty. But essentially, they're just strip mining the country. Look at one of the nations that is heavily supporting Maduro in Venezuela is Cuba. And if we think about Fidel Castro on his death, his net worth in assets was $900 million, and this in a country where the wage is $25 a month or something. And this is what's happening. You've got corrupt people who claim the socialist banner of, we'll make everything better for everybody. And at the same time, they enrich themselves. This is an age-old story that nothing changes. It happens all the time.
Okay, moving from South America to Europe and the UK. Mark, I noted the headline of one of your recent stories. UK faces dangerous political moment in history. Electoral suicide imminent? ? How so?
Well, 3 years on, we haven't left the European Union, as I'm sure all the listeners know. We should have. We should have left on March 23rd. But owing to the parliamentarians and Theresa May, they failed to actually bite the bullet on this and just take us out. So what that means is that we're actually heading into another set of European Parliament elections. So these elections is for the European Parliament. They're running all European Union countries between the 23rd and 26th of the month. Now, we shouldn't be going into these. That's the thing. We should be leaving. But under the treaties that we signed with the EU, if we're still in, we have to stand people in this election. Now, unless Theresa May can cobble together some kind of deal, it looks like we're going to be having those elections. And in those elections so far, Theresa May's leading Conservative Party is not going to do very well.
Well, on that note, we thank you for joining us from all the way across the pond in the UK, Mark Angelides. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
That is our managing editor, Mark Angelides. We'll take a quick break, and then we're back with Trumponomics, the president's surpassing triumph.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel because
Truth
is making a
comeback.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, unbeknownst to most, everyone encased in the Beltway bubble who dismissed his candidacy and characterized him as merely a showman and some combination of stupid and evil. Donald Trump actually ran on one of the most bold and exhaustive reform agendas ever proposed by a presidential nominee. Promises to achieve what a succession of career politicians refused or failed to do abounded in Trump's 2016 campaign. And while the wall took center stage and his promise to appoint constitutionalists to the Supreme Court did lead many right-of-center voters to warily pull the lever for him, it was Trump's audacious assurance of 3 to 4% economic growth and a dramatically improved outlook on jobs that represented the actual centerpiece of his campaign. After all, you can't make America great again without a strong economy and abundant jobs. Considering that he had the political and media establishment crosshairs aimed at his heart from the moment he arrived in the swamp, think about where Trump would be if the economy tanked and unemployment went up. He would undoubtedly become a one-term president. But that hasn't happened. After Trump made it clear during his campaign that bringing back American jobs was his passion.
We have to bring our jobs back, and we have to stop jobs from leaving. Every day we're reading about companies, great companies, Pfizer, great pharmaceutical companies, moving to Ireland. A lot of companies are moving to Mexico. I mean, Mexico's like China, little smaller version. We're losing all of our jobs, folks.
But look where we are now, 2.5 years after Trump was elected. 263,000 jobs added in April alone, continuing a trend of impressive employment figures in virtually every month since he took office, on top of the lowest unemployment rate since we landed a man on the moon and the Mets won the World Series in 1969, 3.6%. Wages up 3% in just the last month, plus 3.2% economic growth in the last quarter. Trump has undeniably put the number one issue in every peacetime presidential election squarely in his column. Up to now, with the wind at their backs by virtue of the Mueller investigation and countless ad hominem attacks, the left and the media have succeeded in changing the subject from the economic successes of the Trump presidency. But with Mueller all but in the rearview mirrors, spinning or ignoring this story will now be almost impossible with a presidential election campaign underway, even for a Trump-deranged media which has all but renounced its journalistic creed and replaced it with unceasing, unapologetic propaganda designed to take this president down at any cost. Amidst this Beltway bubble depicting the president as an unrepentant racist and right-wing extremist, it's easy for a guy like Bernie Sanders to promise free college for everyone, or for Cory Booker to promise reparations for the descendants of slaves, or for any number of candidates to support the insane Green New Deal, knowing none of those policies have any chance of becoming law in the foreseeable future. But it's quite another thing to promise that you will generate a booming economy and, of course, this.
I'll be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. We're going to have jobs.
The greatest jobs president the country has ever seen. Now, that's a core promise on which you will be scrupulously judged by the voters. But therein lies the difference. Trump actually meant what he said. Everything about him emitted an undeniable aroma of confidence, the sense that he honestly believed he could close the deal on what he was promising. After all, and think about this, why else would he decide to run? I mean, having secured the 3 F's, fame, fortune, and family, in enviable measure, and knowing the level of hatred and derision certain to be directed at him, Trump could really only have run for one reason. Wanted to be president for one reason. To do the things that needed to be done which the career politicians refused to do. Indeed, Trump set himself apart from the succession of permanent politicians he mowed down by saying things nobody else would say and promising things no one else could or would deliver. And before you start with the wall and Obamacare repeal, those two major Trump promises as yet unfulfilled. Remember that unlike every other Republican who made empty promises of stopping illegal immigration, Trump has been willing to take it to the mat and fall on the sword for it with his declaration of a national emergency. And Obamacare would already be in the dustbin of history if not for Trump's sworn establishment enemy, John McCain, whose last public act was to kill the Obamacare repeal by his one vote. Despite being weighed down from day one of his presidency by preposterous charges that he was a Russian asset, Trump sent forth the word that after years of a painfully slow recovery from the Great Recession, America was once again open for business. The America First climate that he's engendered, on top of the game-changing tax reform bill and the most aggressive deregulatory scheme in American history, have combined to produce this roaring economy, record low unemployment across the board, and soaring consumer and business confidence. The cascading effects of a roaring economy overflowing with new employment opportunities, now more numerous than the number of people actually available to fill them, have been well documented. Jobs are at the heart of any economic upturn. It's not rocket science. When more people work, productivity necessarily increases, crime is reduced, and Americans become less dependent on the welfare state. Best evidence of that is that since Trump took office, more than 4 million people have been lifted from food stamps. Oh, and by the way, the stock market has risen by 40% since Trump was elected. When it comes to the economy, was Trump right when he said this during his presidential campaign?
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me.
Okay, Americans never get bored of winning. But absent an unexpected recession between now and November of next year, the issue of whether Trump has delivered on his boldest and most significant promise has been settled. Even the nattering nabobs of negativism, as they were originally called by Spiro Agnew years ago, cannot deny the success of Trumponomics. So, who will the voters believe? The bloodthirsty forces arrayed against Trump intent on diverting attention from this robust economy, or their own lying eyes? And we'll be back to examine perhaps the most aggressive gun control manifesto ever put forth by a candidate for president.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now it is time to welcome you into the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim.
Plastic straws. The ban on plastic straws. Let's revisit that. We talked about it a bit last week. And I think it's time well spent to revisit it and to discuss what kind of threat to liberty the plastic straw ban really is.
The reason why I wanted to talk about it again, Tim, is because last week we mentioned that the state of Florida was prohibiting its localities and counties from enacting their own plastic straw bans. And I mentioned how the statistics on that were just kind of made up. And I didn't have that part of the story in front of me to talk about, and I wanted to bring it to the table and talk about it with the data in front of me, because I think it's so wildly demonstrative of these laws that kind of restrict liberty for no good reason, okay? So what happened was there was a public information campaign started by a 9-year-old, Milo Kress is his name, and he decided to try to find out how many plastic straws were in use after he went to a restaurant and saw somebody take a plastic straw that had been served with a soft drink out of their drink and just lay it on the table and never use it. A young civic-minded person who's mindful of the waste that we have. And literally, Tim, this 9-year-old started calling around some plastic straw manufacturers and just did a back of the
back of the napkin.
Well, I was going to say napkin, but perhaps it's a bib or something. I don't know. He's a 9-year-old, right? Whatever.
9-year-olds don't generally use
back of the
bibs,
Sesame
Scott.
Street napkin. In any case, and he came up with the 500 million straw per year figure, which was then cited by Ian Calderon, who was the Democrat majority leader in the California House when they passed their plastic straw ban.
Of course.
And then that figure then became cited by this company called EcoCycle, and then the National Park Service cited, and now it's just without credulity, it's just cited. It's like women earn whatever 70% on the dollar that men do, or whatever that figure is. It's one of these figures that's a lie, but it's cited so often it just becomes part of the conversation. And if you think about, how many straws that means, right? 500 million per day is what these straw banners are saying that we have, and it's of course absolutely ridiculous. 592 drinking straws per person per year in the United States of America. Who is drinking that many straws?
Well, Cory Booker, one of 22 as of last count, announced Democratic presidential candidates, has proposed a gun ban plan. And, Scott, I've got to tell you, it's the most frightening package of gun restrictions and political restrictions I've ever seen, short of an outright ban on all guns. And you think that the most damaging part of the, 18 points in his plan has to do with licensing guns.
He talks about how individuals would have to go get a gun license as a designated local office. Now, of course, in the sort of the memo proposing the plan says widely available in urban and rural areas. So he's already cutting off the objection that where will these offices be? And of course we know, I'm sure when this is implemented, do you think it's going to be convenient? Let's just say he got his wish list. Do you think it'd be convenient to access one of these offices and assert your gun rights?
I envision like one clerk standing there, probably paid the minimum wage, with a line out the door of about 1,000 people at any given time.
Yeah, like one for Northern Virginia, for instance, there would be. And but they would have to submit fingerprints, background information, and then the FBI basically gives them a check and gives them an okay. Just the amount of infrastructure that would be required for the implementation of this plan is daunting, Tim, to say nothing of the bureaucratic hurdles that a person is going to have to go through to assert their rights. And it's the difference between asserting a right, I think, and getting permission to do something that's a maybe thing. And that's a new thing, this idea.
Now, there's many other elements to Cory Booker's plan. He calls for a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines and bump stocks. Of course, we've seen that proposal before.
Yes, but he doesn't say, Tim, the two key points, which are what constitutes an assault weapon or a high-capacity magazine. Now, he's supported other legislation, so he can kind of maybe divine what he would mean by that in this. But what he doesn't say, and I think is a key fact, is whether or not he means for confiscation of those in privately held hands, or just the banning of future sales, like we had with the 1994 assault weapons ban, which
you mean, in other words, whether they're going to come around and knock down your door to take away your guns, or whether they'll say you just can't have any going forward and you need to turn them all in.
Yes, and I would say that while the former is scarier, it seems like that's the only thing that would work from the progressive side of things. And what I mean by that is if you have his mindset, and you want to remove all these guns from the population, well, there are millions and millions of them out there. So if you just say, well, we can't have any more new ones, that doesn't seem to solve the problem that he thinks removing them will. So
I think you'll get a number of people who use the old Charlton Heston expression, out of my cold, dead hands. But there's also, in the plan, ensuring a background check on every gun sale by closing the loophole on gun shows and online sales, and the so-called Charleston loophole. What is that?
All right, there is no loophole for online sales. There's no loophole for any of these things. A loophole would be like within the law, it might say, if there's an active gun show going on, then this doesn't apply, or something like that. That's not all there is in the law. Is people who are gun sellers under the law are required to conduct themselves in a certain manner if they sell a gun, and people who are not gun sellers are not. And I think a great way, he likes to talk about licensing like to drive a car. Well, I think the car analogy is helpful here. If you, Tim, were to engage in the business of selling cars, you would have to be licensed by the state that you live in, probably by the county that you live in. Various consumer protection and professional licensure requirements would apply. But if you owned a car and wanted to sell that car, you wouldn't have to apply for that kind of a license. It's the difference between being a dealer in something and simply having that thing and wishing to sell it. What he's saying is that everybody will now be a dealer in that thing, legally speaking.
Right.
You cannot just sell that thing directly.
Senator Booker also calls for ending legal immunity that prevents victims of gun violence from seeking justice, as he calls it, which means that weapons manufacturers and ammunition...
What it means, Tim, is that if the drunk driver that killed your kid was driving a Honda Accord, you get to sue Honda. That's the level. I mean, think about that for a second. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a firearm that used as it was intended, meaning it fired a cartridge when somebody depressed the trigger, and because there's a dead kid involved or a dead person involved, who are they going to go after? Well, the plaintiff's attorneys are going to go after the gun companies, and he wants to let them do it. And then the families get to recover against somebody is the idea. Meanwhile, every gun company will be left bankrupt by New England juries probably, or California juries who have no sympathy for their free market.
And Senator Booker also is calling on the IRS, this is frightening, using the most powerful agency of the federal government to conduct an investigation into the NRA's tax status, which basically means they will be stripped of their exempt status because of political differences.
It's a true flipping of the coin between whether I am so scared and disappointed by this or refreshed by the fact that he actually said it out loud right in front of us for us to see, rather than hiding it and doing it that way. It is profoundly disturbing to see a person who wishes to be president of the United States. Tim, the NRA has had up to over 1 million members in the past. That's over 1 in every 300 Americans who's been a member of this organization. Can you... I was talking to Lisa Donner.
I know her.
I was talking to Lisa Donner about this issue as well, and I said, can you imagine a Republican presidential candidate talking about an organization so wildly popular on the left or progressive side that 1 in 300 Americans are members or have been members of this organization, and at the outset of their presidential campaign, they want to make it their mission to destroy that organization. And what's the reason for the destruction of the organization? Is it because they're somehow corrupt or doing dirty dealing? No. It's because they're politically effective. That's the message here. The NRA, Tim, is politically effective at marshaling the wants of those of us who give them money to protect our firearm rights against people like Cory Booker. And instead of defeating them politically, right, what he wants to do is use the lever and powers of government in order to kind of like underhandedly come at them at an oblique angle. And guess what? He's going to hopefully knock out their political will to defeat this package based on the power of his office, using the levers of the IRS to punish them.
Do you believe this multifaceted proposal to confiscate guns or make them unpalatable for Americans is generally representative of what most of the Democrats running for president believe?
Yes.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio, plus LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, hosted by our own Mark Angelides. In addition to this radio show, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com, anytime, any place, whenever you want. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week. Same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.